Every relationship you've ever chosen, you think you chose it. You didn't. There's a pattern running quietly inside you. You get close to someone and something and you start scanning for the exit. You love deeply, but with one hand always braced to pull back. You find yourself drawn to people who feel like a question mark, never a period. And when someone genuinely safe shows up, someone who actually stays, who calls when they say they will, who doesn't make love feel like a negotiation, something in you doesn't trust it, doesn't know what to do with it. Because peace, when you were raised in turbulence, doesn't feel like home. It feels like a warning. Maybe you recognized yourself in the person who reaches out first and immediately regrets the vulnerability. Or the one who over-explains, apologizes before they've done anything wrong, and quietly works twice as hard in every relationship just to stay barely ahead of being left. Maybe you recognize the habit of building real intimacy, and then, right when it starts to feel safe, finding a reason to step back from it. If any of that resonated somewhere in your chest just now, stay with me, because there is something about yourself that nobody has probably ever put into words for you. The fear of abandonment isn't just a feeling that surfaces when a relationship ends. It was already there before the first conversation, before the first fight, before any of them. Sitting quietly at the center of every decision, drafting a version of your relational life you never consciously approved. And if you don't understand it, it will keep building. Every time someone left, a parent who checked out emotionally, a friendship that dissolved without warning, someone who chose a different door and never looked back, your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It took notes. It wrote a rule. It said, this is how love works. People leave, so prepare accordingly. That rule became a blueprint. Not a metaphor, a functional neurological blueprint, a set of unconscious instructions your nervous system uses to navigate every relationship you enter. Psychologists call it an attachment pattern, but that word doesn't capture what it actually does. A blueprint doesn't just describe a house, it decides which rooms you walk into, which doors get locks, which windows stay covered, which foundations are trusted, and which are always quietly checked for cracks. Your fear of abandonment in relationships hasn't just been shaping how you feel about people. It has been designing the entire structure of who you let in and who you quietly push back out before your conscious mind ever gets a vote. Think about the last person you deeply wanted but couldn't quite reach. Emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, present enough to keep you hoping, absent enough to keep you guessing. Did that tension feel magnetic? Not because they were right for you, but because the uncertainty felt like something your nervous system already knew. Because your blueprint was drawn inside uncertainty. And the familiar, even when it's painful, reads as home. Now think about someone who was genuinely there, who followed through without being asked, who showed up without keeping score. Did part of you feel uneasy, suspicious, like you were waiting for the real version of them to appear? That is not a personality flaw. The fear of abandonment doesn't just make you afraid of people leaving. It makes you uncomfortable when they stay because staying was never in the original design. So you test, you pull back, you create distance and then grieve the distance you created. You don't do this because something is wrong with you. You do this because a part of you learned to survive the only way it was ever taught. There's a term for this in attachment research. The wound begins to function like a compass. And the problem with a broken compass isn't that it stops pointing. It keeps pointing. It just never points toward home. Here's where I need to say something that might quietly restructure something inside you. You've probably spent years carrying the belief that your relational struggles are about who you are. Your temperament, your worth, your capacity for love, that something is fundamentally bent in how you connect, that you're too much or not enough or simply not wired for the kind of love that lasts. But that belief, that quiet, persistent, devastating belief, isn't truth, it's architecture. It was built over you during seasons you had no control over. And here's what architecture does. It shapes your experience so completely that you stop noticing it's there. You stop remembering there's a world outside the walls. You start to mistake the structure for reality. The abandonment wound, when it becomes the silent author of your choices, doesn't just build walls. It builds an entire world inside those walls. A world where you're always bracing, where silence translates automatically into rejection, where love always carries an expiration date you spend the relationship trying to postpone, where you edit yourself constantly, smaller, quieter, easier, hoping that if you take up less space, maybe this time they'll stay. And the most exhausting part, the more you try to fight it, the more you feel it. You do the inner work, you recognize the pattern mid-moment. You understand intellectually exactly what's happening and still feel pulled by it. Still find yourself in the same emotional architecture, just with different people standing in the rooms. Because understanding a blueprint and demolishing it are not the same thing. Knowing you carry a fear of abandonment in relationships doesn't immediately dissolve what it built. It's like knowing a building has a flawed foundation. Awareness sees the cracks, but something far deeper needs to shift before the structure actually changes. There are people right now, people with real faith, good hearts, genuine intentions, who are being silently governed by a design they never approved, making relational choices from fear, not freedom, giving love from anxiety, not abundance, reading every quiet moment as early evidence that the abandonment they've always expected is already on its way. That isn't living, that is surviving love instead of experiencing it. But here's the part that changes everything, and I want you to hear it slowly. Before the blueprint was drawn from pain, there was another blueprint. One drawn before you were ever wounded, before anyone ever left, before anyone ever failed to choose you. In Jeremiah 29:11, God says He knows the plans He has for you, not plans built around your brokenness, not plans designed from your wounds, plans His prepared before a single scar existed, rooted in a love that does not recalculate, does not schedule its exit, does not quiet down when you become difficult. Psalm 139 says He knew you before you were formed. He saw every version of you, including the version currently afraid of being abandoned, and He did not look away. He did not update His opinion. He did not leave. In Hebrews 13:5, He says it directly, I will never leave you, never abandon you. Not a conditional promise, not contingent on your progress. A covenant sealed before you ever had the chance to fear being left. The faithfulness of God toward those He made was never something invented to make you feel better about a hard life. It was simply always true. And here's the shift that real healing from abandonment actually requires. It is not learning to trust people more efficiently. It is allowing the unmoving, consistent, unflinching love of God to gradually become the new reference point your heart measures everything else by. Not as a doctrine you agree with, as a reality you encounter again and again and again, until your nervous system begins to recognize His steadiness as what love actually feels like. When that shift begins, slowly, genuinely, without performance, the phantom blueprint loses its authority. Not because you forced it out, because something realer moved in. This is what healing from abandonment looks like, not the absence of every fear, not perfect relationships without friction, but the presence of a security so deep, so anchored in the faithfulness of God that fear stops acting as foreman. The relationships that used to feel magnetic because of their uncertainty start to feel exhausting instead of exciting. The people who are genuinely present stop feeling suspicious and start feeling like grace. You begin making choices from wholeness instead of desperation. You start to recognize the difference between what feels familiar and what is actually good, between the people who activate your pattern and the people God placed to slowly show you what steadiness looks like. You stop building from the old blueprint, not because you forced yourself to, but because you found the original one. And it was drawn by hands that have never let go. The structure, the fear of abandonment built in you is real, but it is not permanent. Every door it's sealed, God can reopen. Every room where you taught yourself not to need anyone, He can fill. Every window it covered so you wouldn't see how deeply loved you are, He can restore. This isn't a promise that life becomes effortless. It is a promise that you do not have to navigate love from a broken blueprint, alone, always bracing for the leaving that may never come. The question isn't whether God has a better design for your relational life. He does. It was the first one He ever drew. The question is simpler and heavier, and full of everything you've been looking for. Are you ready to hand the architect who never leaves the keys to what's been built inside you?